Drinking, cutting up, loving women. Great balls of fire.
I asked Mama to do something that was always ask your daddy, so Stand By Your Man came very natural to me.
Country music's rhinestone shimmer has always promised Saturday night salvation, hard-on-the-sleeve heartbreak, and front-porch honesty. Yet behind those sequined suits and stadium spotlights lurk mugshots, subpoenas, and stories far wilder than any chart-topping lyric. Fans heard the romance, radio sold the myth, and publicity men polished halos. But county clerks kept different receipts. Tonight we flip through those dusty files, pry open tour bus closets, and follow a trail of beer caps, arrest sheets, and broken guitar strings to reveal how outlaw reality shaped the soundtrack of a nation. Brace yourself. By the time the fiddle fades, you may never hum these classics the same way again. David Allan Coe swaggered into Nashville with prison ink still drying on his arms. Before anyone bought the outlaw persona, he was already living it. Pulling armed robberies as a teenager, stabbing a fellow inmate over a cigarette debt, and spending nearly 20 years drifting between solitary and the yard. Parole officers assumed he would sprint back to crime. Instead, he surfaced on stage in a rattlesnake hat, bragging that he wrote 300 songs during Lights Out. The records sold, but controversy outsold them. Bootleg tapes dripping with racist slurs and fantasy violence scared off promoters. Coe insisted it was fictional pulp, yet radio stations recoiled. Fans kept chanting his name, drawn by music that still smelled of gun oil. Even now, the question lingers. Was he a storyteller or simply a felon who never clocked out? Merle Haggard was born in a converted boxcar and nearly died behind bars. Busted for burglarizing a Bakersfield roadhouse, he ended up in San Quentin just in time to spend New Year's Eve watching another inmate draw a dagger. Restless, he tried to escape by hopping into a bread truck, was caught, and earned extra months on his sentence. Inside those concrete walls, he heard Johnny Cash perform for the prisoners, felt possibility crack the gloom, and vowed to trade shivs for guitar strings. When parole came, he returned home with discipline forged from lockdown. His debut single preached hard lessons, and Mama Tried turned his rap sheet into a redemption arc. Yet the past never evaporated. Newspaper profiles always led with the mugshot, and Haggard learned that country music forgives, but it never forgets the clang of a cell door. Johnny Paycheck looked like trouble long before he proved it. He could croon heartache until the neon fizzled, but in a Chillicothe tavern, he let fury drown harmony when a patron bragged about rabbit chili. Paycheck barked an insult, chairs scraped, and a pistol cracked, the bullet creasing the man's scalp. The jury named it attempted murder, handed down a hard 2-year stretch, and Nashville critics gloated that the outlaw poster boy had become the poster. Prison humbled him, yet it also burnished the myth. Upon release, he walked straight to the Grand Ole Opry door in state-issue boots, beard thicker, eyes colder, crowd louder. He cut Old Violin, a lament steeped in gunpowder, and swore he was finished with violence. But bartenders still ducked whenever soup bowls or arguments started to simmer near his stool. Irony followed him like cigarette smoke, curling into every verse he ever sang. Spade Cooley once packed dance floors with Western swing so joyful it felt illegal to stand still, yet his private life devolved into horror. Jealousy poisoned his mind, and in 1961 he cornered his wife Ella in their Mojave Desert home. Neighbors heard screaming. By the time deputies arrived, she lay lifeless, her injuries so brutal seasoned reporters wept. Their teenage daughter testified that Spade forced her to watch as punishment for imagined affairs. Convicted of first-degree murder, he traded rhinestone nudie suits for prison denim and was sentenced to life. Fate delivered a final grotesque encore. During a charitable furlough to play fiddle for fellow inmates, Cooley bowed the last note, clutched his chest, and collapsed backstage, dying on the spot. Apologists muttered about stress, but most listeners decided the devil had simply come to settle up the rhythm tab. Faron Young charmed audiences with quick wit and quicker yodels, but rage lurked behind the grin. Stories spread of him threatening his wife with a loaded pistol, spanking disrespectful fans with microphone stands and hurling a glass of whiskey into a policeman's face during a traffic stop. Legal consequences tended to vanish beneath a handshake and an autograph, yet the toll accumulated in late-night regrets. Pain from decades of touring gnawed at him, and depression wrapped tighter than stage lights. One winter morning, he pressed a revolver against his chest, pulled the trigger, and lingered painfully before passing days later. His final note became a cautionary echo through Music Row, reminding newer stars that applause cannot drown the static screaming inside a troubled mind. Lynn Anderson promised listeners they could never see a rose garden without thinking of love. Yet patrol officers remember the shattered headlights on her Jaguar far better than the song. Multiple DUI arrests dotted her later years, each mug shot tightening her smile, and an infamous night in Nashville's airport saw her punch a deputy who asked her to calm down. Cable news looped the video beneath the words, "Rose Garden singer arrested again," while country radio pretended nothing happened. Anderson checked into rehab, filmed a sober driving PSA, and returned to the Opry carrying a bouquet from fellow performers, but critics kept humming a darker refrain. Fame can't pay bail when blue lights bloom in the rearview. She kept her sobriety chip tucked beside a guitar pick, proof that redemption, like gardening, demands daily care under relentless light. Jean Shepard etched her name in country history with plain-spoken honky-tonk hits, yet her most famous performance never reached the microphone. Rumor claims she brandished a pearl-handled pistol at Bill Anderson backstage after a billing dispute, finger tightening before security stepped in. No charges followed, and both later joked about confusion, but roadies still insist the barrel flashed under harsh lights. For Shepard, the tale became armor in a circuit that underpaid women and labeled confidence temper. Whether the gun left the holster matters less than the effect. Promoters never shorted her again, and younger singers dared to demand equal pay. A tiny revolver later hung above her fireplace, and she'd wink when asked if it was the one, reminding guests that sometimes legend keeps better order than law. Wanda Jackson hit the stage in a fringed dress and erupted into a rockabilly scream so raw that genteel Southern promoters ran for the exits. In the late 50s, local sheriffs warned venues her hip-swinging routine was indecent, and several theaters flat out banned her shows. Jackson took the rejection as free advertising, plastering the word "banned" on posters and watching crowds triple in towns just over county lines. Church groups picketed, calling her singing sinful. Teenagers bought tickets anyway, eager to witness a woman who shredded guitar strings like confetti. Elvis himself told her to keep the edge sharp, and she did, bulldozing a path for every rebel queen who followed. Her story proves outrage can be repackaged as rocket fuel when the artist refuses to blink. Tammy Wynette's voice pleaded for standby devotion, yet her own life unfolded like a tangle of unanswered calls. One autumn evening in 1978, she arrived at a Nashville hospital battered and shaken, claiming masked men had abducted her from a shopping center parking lot. Police traced inconsistencies: no witnesses, no ransom, no security cam glimpse. Rumors flared that the kidnapping was staged to hide bruises inflicted at home or to distract from pain pill dependence. Even her daughters voiced doubts in later interviews, suggesting the story covered darker wounds. The file remains open, marked insufficient evidence, yet every retelling grows stranger, cementing Tammy as both victim and architect of mystery. Either way, the hospital bracelet she wore during that interview became as famous as any jeweled crown, a stark reminder that even grand divas sometimes stand alone under fluorescent lights, searching for a believable explanation. Jerry Lee Lewis already believed the devil lived inside his piano keys, so public scandal merely confirmed suspicions. At 23, he married Myra, his 13-year-old cousin, while still legally attached to another bride. British tour dates evaporated overnight, radio stations blacklisted his records, and the killer watched fame plummet from arenas to dim dives. He rebuilt, sliding toward country charts, but whispers followed him like echo pedals. In 1983, his fifth wife was found face down in their swimming pool, Investigators ruled accident, yet the shadow of foul play clung like swamp humidity. Not long before, another wife had died after reportedly OD'd on painkillers in the bedroom hallway. Lewis snarled through it all, pounding pianos with bleeding knuckles, insisting God would judge him, not journalists. Audiences, both repelled and hypnotized, kept buying tickets, unable to look away from the musical bonfire. His legend thrived on pure combustion. Tanya Tucker became a star before she could legally drive, and fame sped faster than any sports car she later crashed. Her whirlwind romance with Glenn Campbell spun tabloid gold, hotel walls punched, wine bottles thrown, luxury limos dented during coke-fueled lovers' quarrels. Police blotters recorded noise complaints in Vegas, smashed mirrors in Lake Tahoe, and an infamous Nashville bar scuffle where witnesses claim she flattened a heckler with one swing of her purse. By 20, she was in rehab confronting addictions she barely understood, yet she emerged with a voice cracked in all the right places. Critics called the comeback miraculous. Tucker shrugged, saying she simply changed dealers, swapping narcotics for raw determination. Today, she jokes that her scars are just stage glitter rearranged by life's rough handshake, and the crowd roars because they see truth shining through every rasp. Survival, after all, makes the sharpest rhinestones. Johnny Cash introduced himself to the world as the Man in Black, yet his legal record once glowed red as desert embers. Amphetamine binges powered endless highway hauls until, half asleep, he sparked a wildfire in California's Los Padres sanctuary, torching 500 acres and killing protected condors. Rangers fined him $32,000. Cash replied that he didn't care about your damn buzzards, a line that would haunt conservationists and delight outlaw marketers. Earlier busts for pills rattled his marriage and career. Agents begged him to slow down, but the music only quickened. In county jails, he sang hymns to drunks, promising better mornings while nursing his own jittery demons. Eventually, June Carter lassoed his heart and flushed the pills, guiding him toward prison charity concerts that recast him as a repentant saint. Still, whenever floodlights cut the stage and bass strings thumped like footsteps, you could sense the old fire waiting for a chance to escape. Townes Van Zandt floated through life like a ghost carrying a guitar instead of chains. Born into Texas privilege, he chose bar stools over boardrooms and spent most nights chasing lightning inside a shot glass. Arrest records list public intoxication, trespassing after hours inside music halls, and one baffling incident where he tried to open a locked police cruiser, insisting it was a taxi. Friends recall impromptu games of Russian roulette on motel carpets, the empty click drawing more applause than any encore. Broken bones, concussions, and detox stints could not tame him, but they did sharpen lyrics that sliced deeper than razors. When he tumbled from a Nashville balcony and refused medical help, he quipped that the ground felt like an old friend hugging back. He died too young, yet his songs still wander, sounding like confessionals scribbled on arrest warrants. Chaos was always the muse. Billie Joe Spears stood on the brink of mainstream stardom when blue lights spun in her rearview outside Dallas. Officers smelled whiskey, found an open bottle, and discovered a small envelope of pills in the glove box. Charges were eventually reduced, but the headlines stuck like red wine on white lace, and program directors quietly moved her singles lower on the rotation list. Spears soldiered on, playing county fairs and VFW halls, greeting every fan with fierce dignity. During Blanket on the Ground, she would lock eyes with elderly couples and choose to believe the song still promised redemption. Some artists measure success in platinum plaques. Spears learned to weigh hers in the steady applause of small towns forgiving a stumble. Years later, she told a radio host that the hardest part of the arrest was phoning her mother for bail money, because disappointment cuts deeper than any courtroom sentence. That honesty, humble and unvarnished, remains her real legacy. Barbara Mandrell cultivated an image so wholesome it could have been bottled with holy water, so when a horrific 1984 car crash shattered her bones, fans rushed to pray. Months later, a lawsuit accused her of exaggerating injuries for insurance money, alleging staged photos of bedridden suffering. Lawyers sparred, tabloids roared, and Mandrell found herself defending not just the crash but her very character. She arrived at the courthouse in a neck brace, quoting scripture and vowing transparency. The case settled quietly, yet the wound lingered. Some listeners heard calculation behind every lyric afterward. Mandrell kept touring, donating proceeds to hospitals, daring cynics to doubt a woman who still hit perfect notes while steel plates hummed beneath her skin. Scandal may have dented the halo, but resilience polished it brighter than before. In later interviews, she confessed the ordeal taught her that grace is measured by how many times you keep driving after the wreckage. Stonewall Jackson earned his name from a Civil War general, and by retirement age, he seemed ready to dig trenches against Nashville itself. In 2008, convinced the Grand Ole Opry benched older acts in favor of fresh-faced pop crossovers, he sued the institution for age discrimination. The filing caused shockwaves, with veteran musicians cheering and executives muttering about loyalty. Legal briefs cited empty time slots, fewer invitations, reduced royalties. The case settled out of court, but the skirmish reopened debate about whether tradition should evolve or ossify. Jackson never regretted the stand. During his final appearance, he waved court papers over the microphone and quipped that even an old warhorse can still kick. Applause thundered, perhaps louder than any verdict, and the Opry curtain fell on a note of uneasy respect. Younger artists later admitted the suit forced management to add legacy slots, proving one rebel lawsuit reshaped the circle forever. Hank Williams Sr. embodied lonesome poetry, yet his final years resembled a runaway train with no brakeman. Chronic back pain led doctors to prescribe morphine, and Hank chased the relief with whiskey until blurred nights turned into public brawls and disorderly arrests. One notorious photograph shows him shirtless in a small-town jail, smiling like the trouble was an encore. He missed Opry shows, got fired, then hired by rival stations eager for ratings born of chaos. On New Year's Day 1953, slumped in the back seat of a blue Cadillac, he slipped into eternal sleep, a pharmacy's worth of pills rattling in the glove compartment. Fans cried that the voice of every broken heart had taken its own. Decades on, you can still hear that twang drifting through Alabama pines, reminding dreamers that genius sometimes burns too hot for dawn. His legend remains a caution sign flickering beside every two-lane road to fame. Stories like these blur the border between sinner and saint, reminding us that country music is not a sermon delivered from polished pews, but a living heartbeat thudding through messy, mortal veins. For every steel guitar sigh, there is an echo of jail doors, ambulance sirens, or court gavels, and that tension charges the art with electricity you can almost taste. Some fans argue the crimes taint the catalog, others insist the flaws make each song ring truer because pain cannot be faked for half a century. Whatever verdict you pass, the evidence remains spinning at 33 revolutions per minute. Drop the needle, listen close, and decide whether the darkness ruins the shine or lets the rhinestones blaze all the brighter. And when the needle drifts towards silence, picture every mugshot, wedding ring, and broken bottle spinning with it, because the grooves hold fingerprints as surely as melodies. Country music, like the country itself, is stitched together from imperfect stories and unresolved dreams.